Welcome to Body Signals, a Signos podcast. I'm your host, Bill Tanser, Chief Data Scientist at Signos. This is Season 3, Episode 4. On today's show, we have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Amy Shah, the author of I'm So Eff'ing Tired. Today, we'll be talking about the most important factors in eliminating fatigue and bringing more energy into your life, why processed foods could be making you tired, the role of hormones and adrenal glands in causing fatigue, and why you should tailor your fasting schedule according to your gender. Before we continue, a quick disclaimer. Dr. Shah's statements and opinions on today's episode are for educational purposes only. No doctor-patient relationship is established by her participation on the show. If you have specific questions about your health, you should consult with your doctor or your healthcare provider. Now on to today's show. Welcome back, everybody, to Body Signals. I am so thrilled to have Dr. Amy Shah with us today. Dr. Shah, welcome to Body Signals.
Thank you so much for having me.
Those of you not familiar with Dr. Shah, she is a double board-certified medical doctor and wellness expert specializing in allergy and immunology, hormones, and gut health. Dr. Shah graduated from Cornell University's School of Nutrition and went on to receive her medical doctorate at Albert Einstein Medical College, and completed a residency and fellowship at the Harvard and Columbia hospital systems. She's also an author, and her first book, and I say first book because we're looking forward to many more, is entitled I'm So Eff'ing Tired, and it's the subject of our interview today. So, Doc, I wanted to start out by asking about the story you opened your book with. You kind of opened the book with a bang. And I love when authors give us a little bit of personal insight into why they've written or chose to write the book that they did. So maybe you could just give our audience a little preview of that intro.
Yeah, and I think the way I think of it is that society tells us that success is something like, getting to the top of your field, or making a certain amount of money, or being married with kids, or that kind of thing. And for me, when I was at the pinnacle of success in my career, in all the check boxes that I had thought was going to make me happy, I realized that inner success is completely different than what I had thought success was going to be. And so that left me with feeling unsatisfied. And basically what happened is I was living in a state of stress and burnout, and this feeling that even though things on the outside looked, successful, I didn't feel successful on the inside. And it all came to a head one day when I was rushing out of a meeting, which I felt I felt that imposter syndrome. And I couldn't say no to an after-work meeting, even though I knew that I had to be somewhere to pick up my children. And they were really young at that point. There was no way for me to call them or text anybody to let them know I was running late. But I was too afraid also to tell my colleagues that I had this prior commitment to my family. And so I ended up doing what a lot of people do, is like I said yes to both things. And I couldn't pay attention during the meeting because I was so stressed that I had to pick up my kids, and I would be late and the center would close, and the lady would be judging me. And then I was thinking, well, if I say I have to leave early, then my partners will judge me. So anyways, I ended up staying till the end of the meeting, and I ran out of the back steps, running as fast as I could to my car. I got into my car and I was like racing to try to pick up my kids. And really, I think about it now in retrospect, and I thought about how I used to be so stressed out all the time. I couldn't even think straight. And during that time, I got into a severe car accident on the way to pick them up. And my first feeling at the end, like when the car finally stopped spinning and all the glass was all over me, my first thought was, still like, oh my God, I got to get out of the car. I got to rush. I got to go get my kids. I didn't even think for a second to like see how I was feeling, like to make sure there was no broken bones. And that luckily, I just had a lot of bruises and cuts, and the car was completely totaled. But in all, I had this opportunity for a week after to reassess my life and to reassess what I was doing and think about what success actually would mean to me and what that would look like and what that would take. And so that was the start of my journey to wellness.
Such a compelling story. And I got your book a couple of weeks in advance of doing this interview. And I usually try and read it right before I do an interview. But I thought to myself, I just want to read a couple of pages. And before I knew it, day 2, I'm halfway through the book. By third day, completely finished the book.
Wow.
It's so compelling. And this book is so needed. I'll just convey my own personal story. I saw a GP, general physician, maybe 5-6 years ago. And I came in with the primary complaint of I'm so effing tired.
Yeah.
And he looked at my blood work, which was a basic metabolic panel, basic lipid panel, and asked me, well, how many hours of sleep are you getting? And I said 6, maybe 7. He says, you need to get more sleep. What's your next question? And that was it.
Yeah.
And going through your book, I saw chapters on hormones and inflammation and gut issues, circadian rhythm, and all of these other factors that play into why we might be tired. And I just couldn't stop reading. And I've got so many questions for you in terms of all of those different factors. So let me start with this one. If you look at all the things that you address in your book, between those, hormones, inflammation, and gut issues, and the sleep that we're getting, what do you think are the most important factors, and which ones do you think are most easily addressable?
That's a great question. Hormones, gut, immune health are all connected. And that's why, I call it the energy trifecta in the book. But they are connected in a way that communicates with our brain at all times. So instead of thinking about it like, oh, I need to balance my hormones, or I need to fix my gut health, or I need to boost my immune system, which is what we say in our Western medical world, really we're learning from the research that it's completely interconnected. And the things that you do to boost one thing will boost the rest. And so I thought, wow, this is so empowering because I don't have to take a set of supplements or like medications or do a certain set of things for my hormones and then do like another set of things for my immune system. I found out that there are so many things like we call it like the neuroendocrine immune, microbiome. So it's basically like the entire system lives in kind of that gut area. And so one of the things that works on all of them is circadian rhythms. So I always say that if you're super busy, you don't have time to read my book, and you just want a quick idea of how to improve your energy, improve your circadian rhythms. And circadian rhythms, for those who don't know, is a 24-hour light and dark cycle that the entire world works on, every single living thing, even plants and microbes. And we, as humans, have circadian clocks in every one of our cells. And our bodies need to sync with the sun and the dark to run proficiently. For example, you'll see that night shift workers have higher rates of accidents, but also higher rates of chronic disease and earlier death. And even when you factor out all of the different things it could be, it really comes down to circadian rhythm misalignment. And what we often do is we live in this perpetual state of circadian rhythm misalignment. And it's something that we could easily fix if we knew more about it. But I think we don't talk enough about it. We talk about sleep, but not in the setting of circadian rhythms. And I think once I understood circadian rhythms, it all made sense to me. And the activities that I did around it made sense to me as well.
So what are some key things that we can do to fix our circadian rhythm if that is our problem?
One thing that's super easy that anyone can do is get more sunlight. Getting input directly from the sun, not from a window, by the way, because that blocks out a lot of the essential signals that we need. But being outside in even a cloudy day, just like natural light. Natural light has been shown to regulate appetite, to regulate mood, to regulate energy levels, to regulate gut health. And so spending time with in natural light during the day, especially in the morning, can be transformative in terms of your energy. It'll also help you sleep better, which then in turn will help your energy the next day.
Okay, got it. That's fascinating. That's one of the practices I've picked up recently is going out first thing in the morning with my cup of coffee, and then getting that morning light on the retina, and then going out again at like close to sunset to get the same light to try and signal to my body that this is morning, this is evening, to try and reset that rhythm. So I guess a practice like that might help to reset circadian rhythm.
Yeah, there was actually a study where they had general practitioners give out a prescription for nature time to patients, and they saw that their mood, energy, and well-being all improved, including certain health markers. And they said, oh, okay, well, if they're spending time in nature, they're probably walking more. So let's control for exercise. If they're spending time in nature, they might be eating healthier. So let's control. So they control for everything they could think of that nature could provide. But there was still a marked difference between the two groups in their energy and their health. So there's something about nature, and I think it has something to do with our microbiome, with our brain kind of sensing all the different parts of sunlight and nature, that has a real energy benefit to our body.
Absolutely. And I've experienced myself making that one simple change. Let me ask you an off-the-wall, well, not really an off-the-wall question. We do have a lot of listeners that are shift workers, a lot of doctors, nurses that don't have the luxury of always sleeping during the nighttime and working during the day. Is there anything that they can do for their circadian rhythm?
Yeah, it's so interesting. So they had animals that they did experiments with animals, and they tried to shift their circadian rhythms by completely shifting all their inputs. So they would be given food during what was their night, and with bright lights, and is basically mimicking like a shift worker lifestyle. What they found is even the slightest bit of natural input of natural light or temperature or food inputs, the body reverts back to its regular circadian rhythm, meaning that you cannot shift yourself to becoming a nocturnal animal no matter what you do. And that to me is the advice that I give to shift workers. I say, no matter how many shifts you do, your body still lives on a daytime schedule. And so that means that as much as you can, eating during the daylight hours, as much as you can, sleeping during darkness. These are things that can help. And also having a washout period, like maybe instead of doing continual nights for years and years on end, having a couple of days off every chunk of time to kind of have that opportunity for your body to reset.
Right. That's a great suggestion. So, Doc, I'm wondering as a clinician, if we just think about your clinic and people coming in to get help with fatigue, what beyond circadian rhythm, what do you find are the most common areas that need to be addressed with your own patients?
Yeah. Quality and timing of diet is something that I think is the next big needle mover. So quality, quantity, and timing. So quality means what kind of foods are you eating? Are they whole foods? Are they minimally processed, or are they ultra processed? And then the quantity meaning, like, are you eating in caloric excess? And then the timing is, are you timing your meals properly? Meaning that I don't mean like, are you eating at, 9, 1, and 6? It's like, are you eating the bulk of your calories before evening, which is the optimal way that the body can digest and use that food? We know that eating, for example, a larger breakfast versus a larger late dinner is beneficial to our metabolism. We have our beta cells in our pancreas are just more primed to release insulin and respond during the daylight hours, especially towards the earlier part of the day, than they are late in the evening. And so really tuning into your diet, like I didn't even know before I had the car accident, I was this seemingly healthy person, but I was consuming probably 60 to 70% of my food were ultra processed, which I think is typical for the average American. And I didn't even know what ultra processed really meant. And now I realize, okay, if you define ultra processed, that means that food that is in a package that has ingredients that have nothing to do with a food or food-like substance is the definition of ultra processed. That means that a lot of things we're eating, even at the health food store, are ultra processed.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've fallen victim to that, of just thinking, well, it's vegan, or it's got all of the I guess they call it greenwashing now, all the labels that make you think that it's healthy.
Yeah.
But that's a great suggestion. So go through the ingredient list on the packaging, maybe before you even look at the nutritional label with the macro breakdown, and see if you recognize all of the ingredients.
Yeah, if they're not anything to do with food, it's considered an ultra processed food. And so I thought about, back in the day, I would eat all these processed bars and chips and coffees and flavorings, and without even thinking that it was unhealthy.
Yeah, greatest example, picking up a Kind bar in Starbucks because I'm on the road and I needed something. Got to be healthy. It's got nuts in it. It's got some dried fruit in it. I didn't realize there was like 20 or 30 grams of sugar in that one little bar.
Right. And that's the same thing with a Starbucks drink. Like I used to, when I was in fellowship at Columbia, right outside the subway station, there was a Starbucks. And I used to say, I would get myself a treat. A few times a week became almost every day. And the coffee was not really a coffee. It was a drink that had a coffee base, but then was full of ultra processed.
Yeah, absolutely. So avoiding that, one of the easiest things you can do to address fatigue is what I take from your advice.
Yes, exactly. So, we now know that the energy drain, that we feel is inflammation, and inflammation in our gut happens from being ill. Well, that makes you tired. I always tell people, if you've ever had an animal like a dog who's gotten sick, you notice that they just kind of sleep and they feel tired. They're kind of like not eating anything. And that's how our bodies react when we're inflamed. We feel tired. Our body is looking for quick energy. We can't do a lot of critical thinking because we're dealing with the inflammation going on in our body. That happens at a low level when you're eating these ultra-processed foods, when you are having a very stressful time at work or in your life. So you end up kind of being inflamed all the time, and inflammation of the body and brain basically looks like fatigue.
That is such a great example. I don't think I've ever heard that example, but it's so true. Ted the cat is sitting right next to me. And when he is sick, he just lays there. He's not interested in playing. He's lethargic. And I've never thought of those same symptoms in humans as...
Yeah, and that's perpetually living life.
Wow. There's so much I love about I'm So Effing Tired. And I really urge everyone listening to this podcast, go out and read it, because we're only going to touch on some of the highlights. But one of the things that I loved about it is you addressed this concept of adrenal fatigue. Now, I've heard this at the water cooler back when we used to have water coolers at work. Not, there's no Zoom version of that, but going back like 5, maybe even like 10 years ago, it was always somebody that had been to back then. It was like a naturopath, not a Western medicine doctor. Would relay this story of I went to see my doctor, and they said I had adrenal fatigue, and they had this then huge bag of supplements that they were given to like cure this. I became fascinated with it, and I think, like you said in your book, I Googled adrenal fatigue because I had never heard of this concept. And you can find two sides. You find the camp that says this is a valid issue, and then Western medicine saying this is a completely made up condition unless you have something rare like Addison's disease. What I love about your book is you actually take the middle road. You're saying, hey, this person's coming in and complaining of these fatigue symptoms. These are probably valid symptoms, but maybe the explanation of what's happening with this individual might be a little off.
That's exactly right. So I was that patient, and it sounds like you were too, where I thought, oh, wow, I have a chronically stressful lifestyle. I'm always on the go. I don't get enough sleep. I drink a lot of coffee. And you look at the symptoms of adrenal fatigue, and it sounds like so many of us. And granted, I think there was a need for, the internet and wellness practitioners and alternative practitioners to pick up the slack where Western medicine had kind of dropped the ball. There was another kind of other extreme. So what would happen is you would Google adrenal fatigue and you would check off these boxes and you're like, oh my God, I have adrenal fatigue. And then there would be a thing that said like, oh, get your adrenal fatigue supplement. And then it would be like, 20 different medicinal supplements that you would have to take forever to support your adrenal fatigue. And that just didn't make sense to me because I thought, well, I have these symptoms, but these things I don't even know, I can't even pronounce, and I can't, just because you're taking something that says natural doesn't mean that it doesn't have side effects. Like I knew that even back then. So I knew that there was something different. And so the more I learned about it, the more I realized that we have hormones in our body for sure. Adrenal hormones do a lot. But what I realized is our hormones are interconnected and that you can't just supplement your adrenal gland, this little tiny eraser-sized gland, and think that that's going to solve your problems. The hormone highway really starts from the brain and goes all the way down to the adrenals, and it stops in every other place around your body, your thyroid, your ovaries, your testes, depending on your gender. And so what I realized is, actually, if you want to improve your hormone, that level of energy, it's not about just supplementing the adrenals. It's about changing that hormonal highway. It's about fixing those traffic accidents, kind of declogging that traffic jam that we all know. If you live in a big city, everybody knows about that traffic jam at exit 2 backs everything up, for every exit before and after that. So it wasn't about just fixing the adrenals. It's about fixing that entire hormonal pathway.
Absolutely. And after I read your section on this particular topic, it made so much sense to me that, of course, the adrenal glands aren't going to they're not going to run out of adrenaline and cortisol. And if you're fixing it and giving your body more cortisol, you're probably just increasing your body's stress. Maybe the right solution, if you are having problems with too much stress and cortisol releases, stress reduction techniques.
Yeah. That men and women get, there's this sister diagnoses of hormonal imbalance of either get oh, get your testosterone replaced or get your estrogen replaced, or you have estrogen dominance, or you have thyroid disease that's not picked up on testing. And I think all of that stems from the fact that people really don't understand how hormones work, and they don't realize that, hey, the hormone system is just reflecting what's happening in the rest of your body, your gut health, your immune health, your brain health. So if you fix your diet, if you fix your lifestyle, a lot of these things will fix itself. And so I think that's a concept that I try to drive home.
Yeah, in fact, I think you start off that first chapter talking about hormones and walking through all the hormones that can relate to not just fatigue, but things like weight gain. There's to go off script a sec, there's a question. I posed some questions to our listeners and asked them what they wanted to hear from you. And one common question we got is a lot of people want to know what role the thyroid plays in weight gain and weight loss.
Okay, so thyroid is a very, very, it's like our master thermostat. And so you can think of it like a thermostat in your home. You can, turn it up and it'll get warmer, and or you can turn it down and it'll get colder. And that's why a lot of people, when they have hypothyroid, low thyroid, the biggest symptoms they'll feel is they'll feel cold all the time, and they'll feel a sense of slowing of the metabolism because that thermostat's been turned down. And whereas hyperthyroid, people will have sweaty palms and sweaty bodies, and their heart rate will be beating really fast, and their metabolism, they'll be losing weight. And that's a typical sign of hyperthyroid. Now, it might sound like having hyperthyroid is good and having hypothyroid is bad, but actually both of them are bad. I see a lot of people that say, well, if I just supplement my thyroid, they find providers of people who say that they're thyroid specialists who are willing to give them some kind of thyroid hormone to quote unquote speed up their metabolism, but that is not healthy. In fact, that is a source of arrhythmias. That means heart rhythms that are out of control. I mean, this can be a serious consequence and cause a lot of heart disease in the future. And so you don't want to just supplement with thyroid hormone just because. And I think that's something that people need to realize, that it's not an easy answer. Like, you don't necessarily want a fast metabolism. Fast metabolism means that things are turning over really fast as well. So your muscles and your bones, and fast metabolism can also mean heart issues. So you don't really want that. You don't want a very low thyroid either. It's like this Goldilocks thing, because low thyroid obviously has the exact things that, people might be picking up my book or listening to the podcast for. Low thyroid symptoms are hair loss and fatigue, feeling cold, and a slow metabolism, weight gain, and sometimes their heart rhythm is very slow. And so that's something that needs to be fixed as well. So I think that I think there's a false thought process in our mainstream culture that supplementing with thyroid is an answer for weight loss.
Right. And you made some excellent points as to why you don't want to just go immediately to the thyroid, but rather view your issues with weight loss, weight gain from a holistic standpoint. So if someone does come to your clinic and they are exhibiting some of those symptoms, is there a test that you run to check to see if the thyroid is the issue?
There's many people who develop, thyroid dysfunction. And so I think it's a great screening test if you are having longstanding fatigue, like things like thyroid and vitamin D and iron levels are always something that you want to check in someone who's complaining of fatigue. That being said, I was just talking to one of my friends who, was really disgruntled with the amount of providers that are not educated on the subject, and they will run these extended, quote unquote, extended thyroid panels, because extended sounds good, right? Like you want extended.
Right. Yeah. I want the Cadillac of lab
And
tests.
so they do all these like unnecessary testing and almost like harmful testing to diagnose things that are not really happening. And if you're not sure what's happening with your thyroid, you should go to a actual doctor. And if you have thyroid dysfunction, you can go to a thyroid specialist that's endocrinology trained, rather than supplementing with thyroid hormone because someone did this fancy extended thyroid panel that has these tests that nobody's ever, that people don't talk about in the literature. And that's my big problem with hormones in general, is that there's a lot of testing out there that is very, enticing, yet not validated, confusing, and often leads to poor outcomes. That provider, my friend that I was telling you about, she said that she often spends a lot of time trying to reverse the damage that people have caused to their thyroid because of false diagnoses, supplements, and thyroid hormone that's inappropriate use.
And I imagine as a clinician, this is like a bigger problem. I wonder how often you get patients that have turned to Dr. Google, have diagnosed themselves, and have come in just wanting you to fix something that they've discovered in a Google search or, God forbid, on an Instagram live reel. Is that common these days?
The problem here is that you can get a lot of fame and fortune from saying something that people want to hear, or selling something that people could take for a shortcut. Like, wouldn't it be nice to take a pill that could take out all the work of, changing your diet or changing your circadian rhythms or changing the time you eat or the quality of your food? It's very, very attractive for someone on YouTube or TikTok to put up a beautiful professional looking background with degrees, and it's like the extent of it is insane how much people are willing to do, because they get a stage to sell their products or sell their concept or sell their books, and it's based on nothing more than kind of hocus pocus.
Yes. So I think the answer here is either go to medical school or find a doctor that you trust and let them do their work. Don't try and do it via Google or via social media.
I want to give you an example. So I was doing a post on social media about testosterone pellets because there's been a lot of interest in people giving these testosterone supplements for men and women that get inserted under the skin, and they kind of release a certain amount of testosterone. So I just wanted to get the studies on it because I know the dangers, and I was going to talk about how that's not a recommended treatment. However, when you Google that, you only get positive reviews for testosterone pellets. I couldn't believe it. Couldn't believe my eyes that Google, which is supposedly a search engine that is unbiased, right? But these companies have manipulated the SEO, manipulated the search so that only positive things were coming up. Like, I've never Googled anything where only positive came up before. And so I was like, what? This is so strange. And you couldn't even, the first article, the first real research article was like buried on page 2 or 3. And I just thought, oh my God, we can't even trust, the search engines anymore to give us truthful information about products. Like, if I didn't know the truth about testosterone replacement, I would think pellets were a great option for me.
Absolutely. One of the takeaways I had from your book is that the body is this amazingly beautiful and complex organism. And you can't just go and try and address one issue with one hormone without throwing everything else out of whack. You really need to have a clinician who knows what they're doing help you with whatever your medical issue is.
Yeah, and I think what we've ended up doing is like, okay, this supplement will help the adrenals. This supplement boosts the thyroid. This supplement, and then you can take all those supplements and still nothing is fixed with your energy levels or your mood or your metabolism. And it's because it's not a sum of supplements that you need. It's really an overhaul. And I learned that the hard way. And, as I explained in the book, and I think that what I wanted to share with everyone is that this concept, like, you have to save yourself. There's no medication or shortcut or hack that's going to save you, from all of the bad stuff in the world.
Absolutely. Want to change the subject a bit. Our audience is really focused on weight loss, and you have a chapter that's focused on circadian fasting. First, I want to just ask you about that term circadian fasting, because I know a lot of people think in terms of time-restricted eating windows. I've got my own opinions on early versus late and different chronotypes, but why circadian fasting versus the buzzword we often hear, which is just intermittent fasting?
Yeah, I think intermittent fasting is like saying exercise. So a lot of the research is so confusing because just like exercise is confusing, right? If you just did a study on exercise, just plain old exercise, you would get people who are running marathons, you would get people who dance, you'd get people who just walk every day, and their outcomes would be completely different. And that's how it is with intermittent fasting. So I try to be more specific about the intermittent fasting that I think is really great for tired, busy people, which is circadian fasting, using the knowledge of the light and dark cycles, knowing how our beta cells, our insulin works, how our brain and our cellular functions work, and taking that into account when deciding how to fast. And so what I say is, hey, you don't need to, fast for 3 days straight to get some of the benefits. In fact, fasting just overnight, having an early dinner and leaving the late night hours fasted, and then waking up in the morning and maybe just like doing a little walk or a small workout and then eating your first meal of the day is the optimal way to heal your body from fatigue and from stress. Now, it's not to say that there aren't other types of intermittent fasting that could be interesting, fun, beneficial, but that this is the type that I think that could help a lot of people who are looking for a small change in their life that's not too uncomfortable, that makes the biggest difference. Because we see with the intermittent fasting research that people can't stick to long fasting intervals, and people cannot stick to, just like they can't stick to dietary restrictions that well. So we want to make something easy, something doable, and something that is going to be a stepwise fashion. So circadian fasting to me makes the most sense for someone who's is new to fasting and wants to start to incorporate that into their life.
Excellent. One of the other things I found was fascinating about your chapter on circadian fasting is that you actually recommended a different approach based on gender. So if you're male versus female, you might want to think about fasting differently, or circadian fasting differently. I wonder if you could just give us a little insight into that.
Yeah, so women have this 28-day cycle, and the 28-day cycle starts with the first day of your period and ends on day 28, the day before your period. So that being said, that week, days 21 through 28, is affectionately thought of as kind of like the time that you're going to be cranky and, have cravings and mood swings. And it's absolutely true that late luteal phase, it's called in the medical world, is the time where women, their hormones are very low, and they tend to have symptoms of insomnia, cravings, fatigue, and higher stress response. And that is not a great time for you to add stressful activities to your body, like fasting, like high intensity exercise, etc. And so I think that one of the things I learned is that we're not the same all year, all month long when you are a woman, because you're having fluctuating levels of hormones, and that means that you can optimize it. Now, a lot of women are blindly just trying to do the hard workouts, that late luteal phase. We're trying to push ourselves to do longer fasting during that late luteal phase, and then wondering why we're failing or feeling depleted. And what I tried to talk about in the book is like, this is not a taboo subject. This is not a secret. This is not something you should be ashamed of. We actually can optimize our bodies if we understand these hormonal cycles better.
So for a woman in the luteal phase, what do you recommend they do? So I hear backing off fasting and maybe very strenuous exercise. Is there any other suggestions that you would make during that phase?
Absolutely. So I consider that late luteal phase. So just that last week, usually it's days 21 through 28, but it varies in different people. That week, you want to spend more time doing self-care, more time in nature, more time doing walking or yoga rather than, the high intensity workouts, whatever high intensity might mean for you, by the way. There are people who, regularly participate in high intensity workouts. And what I just say is like, turn down the volume or the intensity a little bit that week so that you can counteract the increased stress hormones and the decreased ability to tolerate pain during that time. So if you have procedures that you can schedule, you don't want to do it during that week. If you have big decisions about your life, your mood and your serotonin levels are at the lowest point during that part of the month. And so, and I think anecdotally, many women can relate that time you have low mood and less ability to make complex decisions based on the low levels of your hormones. And so I always say that that late luteal phase is really for self-care. It's not for pushing your body, not for big decisions, not for big, if you can push off, if you can, do the more stressful activities in the first part of your cycle, you will notice better performance and better mood during that time.
Great. I want to change the subject a bit and talk about sugar and its role in inflammation and fatigue.
Yeah. So, sugar, if you've ever had a sugar cane, have you ever had a sugar cane?
Yeah, I grew up in Florida, so we had sugarcane fields, and I used to chew on the sugarcane stalk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you remember, how hard it is to get the sugar out of that sugar cane.
You could chew on that thing all day.
Yeah. You literally have to peel it and chew on the rind, and then the juice comes out in small amounts, right?
Yes.
That's how our body is meant to take in sugar in a fibrous food form. Then we got savvy, we got smart. We're like, oh, we're rich now. We can afford to have people who will cut the sugar cane and squeeze out the juice for us and then dry the juice. Then we got even more advanced and we thought, oh, now we know how to do all that, but now we're going to make it really fine and we're going to bleach it. So it's like there's no remnant of sugar cane in there, And that's when the problem started happening. It's like, we didn't know what we were doing. We thought we were getting more advanced and richer or, more, just advanced. But really what we were doing is we were making a food-like substance that is a huge stressor on our insulin system when taken in large amounts, because in nature, that would never happen. You would never be able to consume that much sugar cane all at once.
Absolutely. Now, Doc, you've been wearing a CGM. Yeah, yes. Using Signos. Wondered, in the time you've had Signos, if you've discovered anything about the way you process sugar or your own blood sugar?
Number one, I have noticed that as compared to people that don't have a family history of diabetes, I do tend to run a little bit higher, and not necessarily in a dangerous range, but just on the higher end. And that just tells me a lot, because uh, I get bigger spikes when I eat certain foods, and I know that I have a familiar predisposition to diabetes. So this is very important knowledge for me, because I know that for me it's probably more important than even someone else to regulate my blood sugars, because I know that that I have a family history of impairment. And so for me, it was really important to know what is it that I'm eating that causes the biggest impact and is the hardest for my body to recover from. And so that was really interesting insight. Like, for example, I noticed that when I'm hungry and I eat something like, I have these gummy vitamins, these vegan, gluten-free, vegan,
Yeah.
all this gummy vitamins, and I got it for my kids. But of course, I would have some because I thought, oh, it's just a gummy vitamin. Meanwhile, I noticed that my blood sugar
Yeah.
skyrocketed, because who eats two of those? I had like five, and it was really a stress on my blood sugar system that I never even thought twice about, because it wasn't like a cookie or a cupcake. And that was a lot of knowledge for me to modify some of the things, like, a hard candy or a piece of gummy bear, having kids in the house. I think there's a lot of, like, having one bite of this or that. And it really just opened my eyes to how much of an impact that could have.
I had the exact same first discovery, and for me, it was apple cider vinegar gummies. I saw a television commercial for these things, and there is some research out there that says that apple cider vinegar can dampen a glycemic response to some carby foods. And here I am eating these gummies that I see in commercial, didn't even look at the label to see how much sugar was in this thing that was supposed to help me keep from spiking my blood sugar, and had massive spikes. So that's funny that we both had kind of a similar first discovery.
Yeah, and the things that we think are not necessarily labeled as junk food. I wasn't having a milkshake or a dessert. And so I think that was really eye-opening.
Yeah, that's a great one. For those of us listening that are Signos members, I want to suggest something. Get Dr. Shah's book, I'm So Eff'ing Tired. And when you get to the chapter on circadian fasting, there's a little experiment that we like to try. And just among our Signos staff, we run experiments every week that we like to try, just to anecdotally see if we can notice anything in our own blood sugars. So after reading your circadian fasting chapter, took a carb. For me, it was just a cup of white rice, and ate that same carb first thing in the morning, and then at lunchtime, and then after it got dark out. And look at how that same carb, same volume, same weight, how your blood sugar responds so differently from morning to afternoon to evening. Kind of demonstrates how our body really does have a circadian rhythm that's linked to things like how we metabolize food and how our body metabolizes sugar based on the time of day. So I think it was an awesome illustration for what you were talking about.
That's excellent. Yeah, I think that's such a great point. It's like, you look at it for yourself and you'll see such a huge difference. Like, anecdotally, before I even had a CGM, I knew that for some reason I just felt more energetic. My digestion was better and my mood was better when I didn't eat late dinners or late snacks. And then when I checked my blood sugar, that's exactly what was happening. Is that when you have a huge meal late in the evening, not only do you have bigger spikes, but you often notice that your sleep is disturbed, and you wake up less energetic. And so that was a really great insight, a confirmatory insight into my body. So
Excellent. Doc, we appreciate you joining us. How can our listeners find you if they want to find out more about your book and about your research?
Yeah, they can find me at amymdwellness.com. My book is called I'm So Eff'ing Tired. It's available on Amazon or Audible, Kindle.
Excellent. Again, Dr. Shah, thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of Body Signals. We hope you enjoyed this show. Please take a minute to rate, review, and subscribe to Body Signals on your favorite podcast platform. We have a special offer for Body Signal listeners, a 20% discount on Signos. Just go to signos.com, pick out your plan, and get a CGM in the mail to connect your body in a whole new way. During checkout, you can use the code Body Signals, that's one word, no spaces, Body Signals, to get your discount. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next episode.